Hello, it's Ben Shute here, and today I'd like to share a few thoughts on Mozart's E minor Sonata K304. It's a piece that's often among the earlier sonatas taught to violin students, I think partly because we sometimes assume that it's a smaller or simpler sonata, which I'm always a little bit careful of, because to me the piece doesn't feel either simple or small, certainly not emotionally small. And accordingly, the demands that it makes of the player in terms of nuance are not at all small. Sometimes I think that perception might come from a little bit of a lingering association with Mozart as a square-ish composer, prim, proper, and square. But for me, Mozart is anything but square. When you think of the king of opera, right, being able to, even in his instrumental music, he'll take you from one incredibly defined character, and then in a blink of an eye, you're another incredibly defined character, but totally contrasting. Mozart's music, it reminds me of something that as a young person in phys ed class we would have. I believe it was called the shuttle run, where we'd start from a point and run in a straight line, and we'd have to pick up an eraser or something off the floor, run back to where we started, put it down, and it was how quickly you could finish the course, but just going back and forth, and it's testing how quickly that you can stop and start. And I feel like Mozart is a bit like that. Just the rapidity with which you have to be going full tilt in this direction and then full tilt in this direction requires a great deal of mental athleticism, really. So for me, Mozart is very difficult to play for that reason. And I think this sonata is no exception at all. Added to that is the fact that it's a very dark and brooding work, actually. There's definitely a kind of a Sturm und Drang, a storm and stress sort of feel to it. And sometimes it, to me, almost feels a little bit menacing in terms of how violently it can change character from something, mysterious, cold and mysterious, to explosive and angry almost. And of course we see that at the very beginning of the sonata, where you have this this melody that is just this floating melody, suddenly yielding to this angry outburst. So what I'd like to do is just walk through a little bit of the beginning of the first movement, and talk over a few points that I think might be helpful to consider, and that might be good for forming paradigms for the rest of the piece. So right from the beginning, so I think that we're basically, the violin is basically just filling in a little bit of sound into the piano's articulation. We're playing in unison with the piano, and I think it should be something very almost not there. We're just kind of giving that little bit of extra shape, a little bit of extra color. Now, I like to feel a little bit of space between those half notes. Sometimes you'll hear. In any case, I wouldn't play legato. I'm not convinced that's stylistically what Mozart might have had in mind. So I do prefer a little bit of space growing to the top. Now, personally, some people will breathe at the top. I like to keep the gesture going just so it's a little bit of a longer arc. That's just me, and then let our first breathing point be here, and then now of course I'm very quiet, but again it's just because I'm really thinking of the violin sound as just rounding out and filling in, adding a little bit of extra color to what the piano is doing. So when we get here to the end of the first phrase, I always want to try to feel a little bit more time than you would feel as if on a click track. Whenever we're dealing with any sort of so-called early music, I think it's very important to remember that the click track is a modern phenomenon. the pulse in any early music is always governed by hierarchies, strong beats, weak beats, and that has implications for timing too. The just in the same way that gravity. Einstein talks about gravity warping space. Well, the weight, the gravity, so to speak, of the heavier beats of a bar warp the space around it. They create more space for themselves, and so the heavier beats, the strong beats, so 1 in a 4/4 bar, for example, 1 and 3 are going to have a little bit more weight to them, including weight of timing, I think, than 2 and 4. And then, of course, the 1 and 2, the first half of the bar, being slightly heavier than 3 and 4. And of course, that's a template, and that's all affected by where the phrases are going and how things are being shaped, where the agogic is, and so forth. But we want to think of pulse as something that is flexible around the demands of the music, rather than the music being made to fit a click track. So, where were we? At the end of this phrase, this is one place where I don't like to feel the next beat coming too quickly. Sometimes you almost feel like, sometimes you feel like the performer knows what's coming. And that's what I have to try to not let myself do. I have to almost not know that explosive forte is coming. And each time, after every one of those gestures, similarly, I have to not let myself know what's coming, because it could be anything. Right here. But he does it again. And then it could break off there and do something else. But again, it doesn't. It keeps going. But when it keeps going, it doesn't go. Right? It goes. And then when it keeps going, right? So the gesture shortens. It doubles on itself and accelerates us toward the end of the phrase. And each of those moments should be as surprising as we can make it. So. And then it hangs, and where's it going to go from there? Back into the opening melody. But this time, for me, it's a little bit more open and lyrical, because the first time when we have it just in unison with the piano, as I said, the violin's just filling in a little bit of color in the piano part. But here, we have the piano part is moving in these kind of sighing figures in thirds and sixths, as if it were pairs of wind instruments. And I think on top of that sighing, our melody can really be incredibly plaintive, really very well shaped. Now this melody repeats also quite a lot. It will repeat 2 more times written out, but then also each half of the movement has a repeat sign. So there's going to be quite a lot of melodic repetition. And one option that we have for enhancing and diversifying the expression are different kinds of ornamentation. That's absolutely an option for Mozart. In fact, it would be an expectation, really, in Mozart's day. Some degree of tasteful ornamentation that would enhance the expression. That's the goal. We don't want to just do it for its own sake. But the understanding in Mozart's culture was that ornamentation would enhance the expression. So there are all sorts of things that you could do. A little turn, grace, trills, another type of grace note, and then something as simple as just changing the articulation. Instead of 4 separate, what's written as 4 separate quarters can be, you can add slurs or change the bow direction, but simply make some notes stick together a little bit more and others release. So I mean, there are any number of ornamentation options that we have. In fact, the next time it comes back, Mozart writes out a kind of dynamic ornamentation that he very often, you'll see when he writes out his own ornamentation in piano music. Sometimes one of the devices that he uses to ornament, so to speak, is actually forte and piano contrasts. And the next time the theme comes back, we have, this is the very beginning of the recapitulation in the second half of the movement. This suddenly forte-piano. Every two measures, right, we have this forte and piano, and it's accompanied by this in the piano part that has a function almost, to me it feels almost like a written out vibrato. It's interesting. Mozart's father, Leopold Mozart, in his treatise on violin playing, talks about the function of vibrato. He calls it tremolo. But he says it should feel like when you strike a bell, first you hear a pure boom, and then as the note dies away, it shimmers a bit. And he says that's the effect that the tremolo or the vibrato should have on the violin. And it's actually quite a lot like what Mozart writes out here is a magnified version of that effect on the piano. And so we have this feeling of almost like an impact on a bell, or, or to use other natural imagery, like a lightning strike or something. And each time it should be really dramatic. And you can think about how can we switch that up. So how can we the timing, the way we emphasize it, the way we approach it. One time do we feel like we're growing into it, and then maybe the first time we grow into it and are surprised by it. The second time we feel like we're coming away, and and that emphasis still comes back. I mean, there are any number of expressive possibilities, but we don't want to limit our expressive range when we approach Mozart. Sometimes we equate expression with Wagnerian style, and so we think that something like Mozart, which would not involve a Wagnerian legato and a 20th century vibrato, that somehow that is less expressive or less dramatic, and that we need to really disabuse ourselves of that, because that is not at all the case. We want to be wildly, almost violently expressive in these contrasts, just in a way that's appropriate to Mozart and his style and his instruments. So yeah. Okay, so continuing through let's jump back then to where we were in the exposition. So. And then the piano has this, the violin, piano, and then the violin again. With that nice Neapolitan. You could ornament this at some point, or various different options. But something to consider. Okay, so then totally change of key. So we've been in this very melancholy, brooding E minor, and then suddenly we have this bright C major. But even then, it suddenly gives way to a piano. Then back to forte. But these rapid changes from forte to piano remind me a little bit of a trio sonata that can be visually instructive. Actually, it's a trio sonata by Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach, who actually was a large influence on Mozart. And the title of this trio sonata is Sanguineus and Melancholicus. So it is Sanguineus. It's actually the two violins represent these two different characters, these two different humors. And Sanguineus is very sunny and cheerful and animated. And then, we'll play something, and then Melancholicus answers. And then Sanguineus plays, and Melancholicus. You have this wonderful visual image of these two contrasting characters, and of course with these Mozart sonatas, we have to be sanguineus and melancholicus all in one little fiddle. But something about Mozart, I mean, he's never just black and white like that. It's not just happy and sad and this sort of thing. I mean, it's as though you have a color spectrum on the wheel, right? The color wheel, and you can go from between, say, red and green, opposite colors, but it's not just between those two. Mozart will take you from here to here, and then here to here, and there to there, and just exploring contrasting emotions, but across the whole spectrum. And I think that's one reason why Mozart is such a great composer. But anyway, it can be visually. I find it visually helpful in a passage like this. So when to play the violin part, to think sanguineus, melancholicus. Oh, and then maybe we can be a little more hopeful. And then we go on to accompany the piano. And then violin sure chimes in. But I think there we can really savor those that minor. I would be careful that the short notes are just very light and very short. And I like to take a little bit of time there to leave that question open until the piano can come in. And then the violin enters. And again, the question is left hanging until the piano says, yes, we are indeed in G major, and it's going to end on a sunny note. And this is the part where, you'd expect if this were a concerto or a symphony, it's building up to the tutti. And then the tutti enters and carries us away. Well, that's not what Mozart does here. So we have to feel this drive to as if into a tutti. Then he surprises us with another piano. And we're playing the role of a, that kind of bell-like sound again. Well, there's and it slowly builds up again, right? So, but finally the whole thing does cadence on a bright note, G major, before a canon ensues that pulls us back toward E minor for the repeat. Okay, so as we, then we play the development, very eerie, these repeated notes in both violin and piano. And I think, again, as eerie a feeling as we can get from that is ideal. But in the recap, what's notable about minor mode movements of this sort, and you find the same thing actually in the Mendelssohn, something similar in the Mendelssohn Violin Concerto or the Brahms E minor symphony, Fourth Symphony, and of course these are all, as I think about it, E minor pieces. But what you have is the material that you find in the contrasting kyria in the exposition. So it goes to major, in this case, bright, a nice, sunny, relaxed, calm, peaceful G major. And the effect that we have in the recapitulation is as the tide had turned in the exposition toward major, now in the recapitulation, the tide turns toward minor. And the place where we've seen the sun come out before, now it stays this dark E minor. And one by one, the musical events unfold that had unfolded in major are now unfolding in minor. We knew it had to happen that way because that's the key of the piece, right? So it's like in a Shakespeare drama where the from the beginning that Romeo and Juliet are going to die. You know it, right? So where's the suspense? Well, the suspense is in seeing how that announcement, how that foretold doom, so to speak, inexorably works itself out through the course of the drama. And we need to feel a bit of that sort of tragic drama in this Mozart sonata, even this little Mozart sonata and pieces of this sort, so that we're aware that everything that seemed to be sunny, right? We seem to be escaping E minor in the exposition, but now in the recapitulation, as we're drawing toward a close, everything comes back in E minor, and we need to feel that kind of tragic fatedness almost to end in that tragic key of E minor. And I think that can lend the whole movement a very weighty, a very musically, conceptually weighty feel, that can really bring a dramatic intensity that makes even this seemingly little piece very, very deep and very moving. So I think that's about all we have time for at the moment. But once again, I hope these are some helpful things to think about, and happy Mozarting. Thanks for watching.